August the 29th, 1981. And 29 teams from 15 nations make their last-minute preparations at Gosport Marina for the start of the greatest yacht race in the world. The third Whitbread Round the World race. A 27,000-mile marathon starting and finishing at Portsmouth with stopovers at Cape Town, Auckland and Mar del Plata in Argentina. It's attracted top names like Che Blythe, Eric Tabarly, Peter Blake, Alain Gabet, and of course, Connie van Rietschoten. For the 5 maxes like Flyer, all competing for line honours, the voyage will last 7 months, and 8 or more for the smallest yachts. On Flyer, concentration is intense, for this crew, fighting for an early lead, must run the gauntlet through the hundreds of spectator craft. After Connie van Rietschoten has steered Flyer through the lee of Saramco, New Zealand to take the lead out of the Solent, the start marks the end of 15 months intense preparation for Connie, who is intent on winning line honours into every port. For friends and well-wishers saying goodbye, there's now 6 weeks of nail-biting anticipation to see which yacht reaches Cape Town first. This race provides an ultimate challenge. 3 lives were lost during the first race. But this has not distracted others from following in greater numbers. Ahead of these 29 crews are the threat of storms, icebergs, and intense cold. Some also face broken masts and bones, frostbite, and collisions with whales. But for Connie, the lure is as strong as ever. He's entered for the 2nd time, having won on handicap 4 years before. This time he has one of the biggest yachts. He's out to win outright and set a new record time for the circumnavigation. Flyer's principal rival proved to be Saramco, New Zealand, an outsized dinghy, 68 feet long, designed by Bruce Farr to excel in the roller coaster conditions of the Southern Ocean. '60-year-old Frenchman André Vian, skipper of the 62-foot Creta 9, and Alain Gabet on board the black-hulled Charles Heidsieck 3 have also tackled this race before and are out to win on handicap this time. Alaska Eagle is the old Flyer with which Connie won the last race, and heavily modified, now has a remodeled stern and single taller mast. One of the biggest lessons Connie learned from the earlier race was the need for better clothing. He found even the best oilskins leaked, and the sheer bulk of the many layers of polar wear needed to keep warm in the Southern Ocean badly restricted movement. So this time, Flyer's trials before the race were used to test new materials and technology for Musto and Hyde, who designed a special range of warm wear and waterproofs to keep the crew warm and dry throughout the race. But one area where crews need no clothing is the doldrums, that region of humid calm dividing the trade wind belts where yachts and dolphins can laze for days.
Normally the doldrums take about 2 to 2.5 days, but this year the doldrums went on and on forever, and we lost about 5 to 6 days. We noticed that we had lost all the water out of our starboard tank, and that was of course very disturbing. So we had to start rationing water, but we were lucky on the other hand that we had so much rain that it took us very little trouble to get 500 liters back and fill up the starboard tank again.
The skipper of this tuna boat confirmed to Connie over the radio that these light winds stretched for 500 miles. So, at least Flyer's crew knew they were not alone in being in the calms. Flyer was the first to reach the southeast trades 65 miles ahead of Saramco. But it is in these headwinds and pounding seas that masts and rigging come under the greatest strain. Saramco's lightweight fractional rig was at even greater risk, and her Kiwi crew paid the ultimate penalty 6 days later when their mast broke in 2 places, 3,500 miles from Cape Town. It was disaster, for with this dismasting, Peter Blake and his crew lost all chance of winning. Within 24 hours, though, they'd set a jury rig.
After the blow that the crew must have suffered, it really was Peter Blake's qualities of leadership that pulled them through. To set up a jury rig as they did, and sail the boat to 3,500 miles to Cape Town instead of heading for the nearest port at Ascension Island, took a great deal of courage, and I don't think that we can praise Peter's ability enough.
Escaping the calms of the South Atlantic, Flyer reached Cape Town on October the 4th to take line honours in record time, 2.5 days ahead of her nearest rival. When handicap times were taken into account, though, Creta 9 led the fleet 12 hours ahead of Heidsieck, with Flyer third, 27 hours behind the leader. In Cape Town, Flyer's crew immediately set to work to service equipment and haul the mast out. Even the smallest items had to be checked for wear and tear, and forestay and rigging pins were replaced as a precaution. With 3 yachts dismasted on this first leg and 10 others arriving with major rigging problems, including the handicap leaders, Creta and Heidsieck, the Flyer's crew's meticulous preparations were beginning to pay off. Saramco's crew, who limped into Cape Town 11 days behind Flyer, had a replacement mast flown in from New Zealand, and these Kiwis had to work round the clock to make their yacht shipshape again in time for the start of the second leg. There was time during Flyer's stopover in the docks beneath Table Mountain to have the yacht lifted out for re-anti-fouling, as well as for repairing a leak in her keel that had given some concern during the first leg. Flyer's spare equipment and food weighed more than 3 tons and was flown to each port of call. But once the work was over, Connie made sure his team relaxed to guarantee that they'd be fresh for the next start. They all took a week's break away from Flyer, touring the countryside, while many other crews worked without a break, frantically preparing their yachts for the next leg. October the 31st, and the start of the second leg to Auckland, a 7,100-mile helter-skelter run through the stormy, ice-ridden waters of the Southern Ocean, and a last chance to wave goodbye to newfound friends. Flyer now had to beat Heidsieck, whose crew were expected to be the greater threat in the fast downhill conditions to come, by 82 hours, as well as steal a 108-hour advantage over Creta if she was to take the handicap lead at Auckland. It was during these last-minute maneuvers that Flyer was nearly rammed by Swedish entry, moments before the start gun fired. Amazingly, the 2 yachts escaped without a scratch, but the Scandinavians were later forced to retire in Auckland when funds ran out. The wild Southern Ocean conditions were the real lure to this race for Connie van Rietschoten. But how would Flyer fare against purpose-designed downwind machines like this Swiss yacht Disque d'Or, or Charles Heidsieck, or Soramco, New Zealand? It was an answer that could only become clear at Auckland. Flyer tacks away from the last of the spectator boats into the South Atlantic swell, and soon has the measure of Alaska Eagle and her re-rigged rival Soramco, New Zealand. As dusk falls, she slips into the lead ahead of the two French boats, Charles Heidsieck and the ketch-rigged Euromarché, skippered by Eric Taberley. Flyer was first to pass Sentinel Rock, but the real race was down to the Roaring Forties, where the westerly winds, uninterrupted by land, are rarely less than gale force. Once clear of the Cape of Good Hope and the notorious Agulhas Bank, skippers face a choice of routes through the Southern Ocean to New Zealand and must decide between the shortest but coldest course down to 56 degrees south, or gamble on getting more favourable winds in the higher latitudes. Flyer's navigator, Daniel Fwolowski, made a thorough study of the conditions before the start, and armed with that information, it was decided to stay within the more favourable airstream expected on the longer route to the north. It was no coincidence that Soramco's crew chose to follow close to the same 50 degrees south latitude, where the warmer weather and surfing conditions more than made up for the extra 200 miles they had to sail.
Going into the Southern Ocean, we were going to see who was going fastest downwind, Soramco, Heidsieck, or us. Soramco was specially designed for this leg by Bruce Farr, and I remember that Bruce Farr had said in the papers that if Soramco wouldn't be first boat in to Auckland, he would leave New Zealand in shame. So they really were determined to be there first, but so were we. We had a fantastic race, and we pushed and pushed and pushed, and so did they. But in the end, we beat them. And of course, that was very satisfying.
It proved to be a classic race. 5 days out, Soramco stole 17 miles from the leading Dutch yacht. Did she get the wind earlier, or was she faster than Flyer? The following day, Flyer ran 287 miles, her best run yet. But Soramco gained yet another 20 miles and was now only 30 miles behind. The race was on.
It's of course very funny when you have the whole Southern Ocean in front of you, that you have to sail between Marion and Prince Edward Island, and even have to do some very close sailing not to hit Prince Edward Island or have to go to the north side of it.
Some crews were forced to steer north, including the British team on Challenger, the largest yacht in this race, and Flyer gained more than half a day on them as a result. But even staying this far north on the 47th latitude, Temperatures remain around zero, and with the wind chill factor, this drops to more than minus 15 degrees centigrade when the anemometer shows 35 knots or more across the deck. There is an ever-present danger of running into ice, a particular hazard at night. But these small growlers are nothing compared with the huge icebergs spotted by Swedish entry and Bergviking, 300 miles further south. The Flyer's crew, however, had other problems.
6 days out of Cape Town, early in the morning, I was thrown out of my bunk by a couple of broaches, bad broaches. And I went on deck. The helmsman had already been replaced by the New Zealand watch leader. But I found the boat going at a very high speed with much too much sail up, no reef and a big spinnaker. So I said to Earl, we better get the reef in.